야, 드니 대랑 아촌다나 용근 참마라 슈조 데라간 참주지인.
Good afternoon or good evening to everyone who's gathered here tonight.
드니 대랑 아촌다니 UC Berkeley가 드니 로다 침보 나라 용네 미망본들이 망보다 냠더 갑다시야 드니 골급숑라 베 가보숑송.
I am so happy to have this opportunity tonight to come to the University of Berkeley and have this chance to engage in dialogue with so many of you.
드니 대랑 아초 갑다시야 드니 조샤 드니 갑샹데 드니 세쪽 ren탕 제야 드니즈레.
And the topic for tonight's talk is the value of a life.
드니 당봉아 저 세쪽 제야 되다 드니 ren탕 제야 돼 돈당니 토라 삼로 당공도.
So in thinking about this topic, it's necessary that we address two words. Firstly, value, and secondly, life.
드니 아초 낭추고 나라샤 비 세쪽 대당 드니 아초 킹우르 바 차르 바샤 비 세쪽 제야 드니라 대전 자우 말이.
So in terms of how we define a life, there are some dissimilarities between the way Buddhism defines life and biology in modern science does.
드니 킹우르 바나랑아 초페나 메나레 던조에나레 드니思想의 나레 대서 참말라 드니 세쪽 제가요레 드니 코랑거 고와 디토니샤나 대서 참마 세쪽제나 초거레.
In biology, humans, animals, and even plants are all considered forms of life. So this definition, biological definition, is fine for biologists to use.
드니 아초 낭슈 나라 드니 세쪽제야데 간디즈라 제거레즈나 모다 던조다 든지 아초라 데와당 등거거 초로와 용칸 드니 삼로 당신칸 든지 zgla 드니 세쪽제거레.
However, in Buddhism, we define life as human or animal in nature, essentially those beings that are capable of feeling happiness or sadness, capable of thinking. This is how we define life.
든지 드니 아초 思想다 대소라 다 짜다想다 매도다 대소라 세쪽제가 말해.
So with this definition, we don't define plants, trees, and flowers, grass, etc. as constituting life. So this is a difference in the way that biology and Buddhism understands life. However, this is not a contradiction. So what I would like to talk about today is life in terms of human life and animal life. And then we need to look at what we mean by value in relation to life. In the world, that which is the most valuable or the most priceless would have to be life. Even though life is something that is not able to be given a value, nevertheless, we do give a value to things like fish and insects, birds, etc., how much it would cost if we needed to buy them or if we wanted to eat them. However, this valuation is one that is imposed by others on these life forms. So even though this value evaluation is done by someone else imposing a value externally onto these lifetimes, from the point of view of the life in question, this isn't a reflection of their value at all.
Tani nya chung chung denjin da boda sha chung chung denjin da bozla nga chung mi jambas chikateni ta sanlo tangna te tondak chimboz mare samne te gormo sum gormo nga denji ga deni ta rentang denji re samne nga chu denji sam gre se jambas ga samna reda khorang rang ga samlo tangna deni khorang ga chechok de la rentang samne me pa rentang janga jab ma tha ba denji re.
So even though someone looking on a small fish or a small bird might not think it was worth very much, someone might look at such an animal and give it a value of $3 or $5. From the point of view of the animal or the life in question, their own life is something that is priceless in nature.
Teni nga chu jamba chikateni chechok jamba chikla Teni kyorang ga renggong de kyorang ga chechok ga renggong de ndri rezene kung teni jawyate te nga chu norwa res.
So one form of life imposing a value on the life of another life form is a great mistake.
Pena pe jana tera nga chu mi nga chu tawala samlo tangna pena nyama chigla nga chu karma jang ga thone yongkhen ga mochi yone teni nga chu changma nyam de zone o min de so che chokla ta gormo kaje rezene tindi kongchi china tindi rengkong tindi jabna te nga chu chawane kheleng ga mares.
So we could say, let's imagine that Martians, aliens from another planet, suddenly arrived on Earth amongst us and started to say how much our human lives were worth. That is, they imposed a valuation on our lives. This is something that we would not accept in any way.
Tani ngarang cho susu samlo tana ngarang cho chechok de tani rengkong changa jam matha pi tani rengkong tani yin samne nga cho sam go yores.
So from our own perspective, looking at our own lives, they are something that are not able to be given a valuation. They are priceless in nature.
Tani nga cho da chingparese pe na nya chung chung sha chung chung bu chung chung tani zi na chama ga tani khorang rang ga samlo tana ngarang ga chechok de tani zambolang ga tani longshu gang le jang ngupo gang le jang ngarang ga chechok de tani jiba da marwa da tani rengkong jam matha ba tani re samne chama ga tani sam go yores.
And it's not just ourselves who think in this way. Any kind of life form, from a small bird, a small fish, or a small insect, from their own perspective, their life is something that is the most valuable out of any object in the world. It's valuable, it's precious, it's cherished.
Tani nga chu tani chechok jamba chola tani rengkong jamne gomo ngayen gomo chin zeatila tani niluk chawane yo mares niluk yo mares te gimsen chawane yo mares.
So to impose a value on another life form, to say it's worth, say, $5 or $10, is something that is completely without reason. It is without logic.
Gimsen chipo de gangreze na wangcha reze wangcha la teni shege yore ma to jamba wangcha chipo ma to ba jamba ga niluk chawane de yo mares.
The only reason that we are able to do so is due to power. Aside from power, there is absolutely no other reason justifying this action.
Tani nga cho wangcha de teni kali teni niluk rin ro yores.
And this power, however, is increasingly becoming rationalized, made more reasonable.
Garti nga cho wangcha de teni niluk re sona teni nga cho ta tarta nga cho simjin cho denro go teni chechok la rentang jab go yore rete nyima chigla nga cho mi ru go teni mo cho panchang chigla mur mi teni mo te garwo ta nakbo ta sero yin nanja yangnan zambolang go murung cha da manja yin nanja teni nga cho nang go chigla teni kyorang go chechok la teni golmo kaje re kyorang go chechok la golmo kaje re wangcha yongken cho wangcha menken cho la teni go teni kong rengkong teni jab go re nyima chigla.
And if this kind of normalization of the powerful imposing value or definitions of value onto the lives of others continues, then one day we will reach a point where it's not just animals that we impose a life value on, but we start to do it in respect of other humans. So the powerful start defining the value of the powerless, different groups of people, different races start imposing values on each other, different ethnicities. This is what will happen one day if we continue in this direction.
Karti wangchata topshik te teni niligre sona teni nga chon zambalang ko thola yo pi mo wangcha yongkan mo topshik yongkan te so teni mo wangcha menkan da mo topshik menkan te so teni kyorang ko chechok ko ran thang de teni gormo chigre jene teni ta khorang ko rengkong gyabna te nilig tang damba teni jento res.
And what would happen is that the powerful and influential in the world, their valuation of the lives of others, dealing out or giving values to the other life forms, saying this life form is worth this much, that life form is worth that much. This kind of practice will become increasingly normal.
Jiti inna yang teni khorang la sanglo tangma perna nya chung chung, sha chung chung, teni mbu chung chung, teni zi inna khorang ka sanglo tangna teni te tsawani khelin, te tanglim shi tabko mari se khorang la sanglo tangna.
However, as for the small bird or the fish or the insect, this imposed valuation of their life is something that they would never accept.
Indi khorang ka sanglo tangna ngarang ka chechok te rentang sawani mepa ka teni rentang janzi yin samni teni sam ka yores.
From their point of view, they would think that my life is something that is unable to be valued. It's not able to be given a value, it's priceless.
Tenji indi nga cho chechok la rentang yo tang me ka thoni shana nga cho zambalang ka simchin changma chigba rezi chechok la rentang yo me ka thoni shana.
So in terms of the question of value, in fact, all beings in the world are exactly the same.
Jamnim rezi, chaman jamnim rezi.
They are all equal.
Jamnim mayem ba chigbo te nga cho wangcha re, wangchan jamnim ma rezi.
The only respect in which they or we are not equal is in terms of the amount of power we possess.
Jamnim mayem ba chigbo te nga cho topshik rezi, topshik ten jamnim ma re, wangcha ta topshik ni kan jamnim mayem bi gimsenji, tani nga cho chechok jamba cho la nga cho teni gong rengkong gyabne, tani teni shege yore.
So it's only on account of the disparity in influence and power among beings in the world that some have the capacity to impose a value of life onto others.
Tani di chani shana nga cho nangba ga tani shana nangba ga zena tani zambalang ga simchen changma tani gang yin na anja nga cho mi yin na anja dendro yin na anja simchen changma di thoni shana changma ramnim yin song ga yores.
So from this perspective, the Buddhist teachings hold that all beings, whether it be humans or animals, are all equal.
Tani ramnim yin chardi tani nga cho dong ko thola tani ramnim yin di tani nga cho chechok changma ga panchang chig chigla suso go tani mi ger kngoni sanglo tana suso go rentang chechok de rentang me pa yin samni tani samba tela tani nga cho zunjok she gong du.
So given the fact that we are all equal, it is necessary that we respect the belief on the part of every single life form in the pricelessness of their own life.
Teni karti tela nga cho zunjok she mashina teni di teni ta te tarong yar gyachimbo ra ore sona teni nga cho maung bala nga cho so rang thola teni mi nangla teni nyota tele chimba teni tar nga yang mambol hebe ore maung bana mambol heb gres.
But if we're not able to do this, if we're not able to respect the pricelessness with which other life forms regard their own lives, then we will increasingly encounter all kinds of trouble. In fact, we're already seeing all kinds of trouble in the world, and this will only grow more extreme in nature.
Tindi indi nga so zambalang ka jibdezin, zambalang jibdezin ni mi mambo usha ka yore, mi mambo molum jab ka yore, mi mambo tini rewa jab ka yore. Rite te molum chikbo yung mare zi, nga so leka lego ndugzi.
So in terms of happiness and peace in the world, this is something that everyone talks about, everyone prays for. However, this isn't something that's just going to come about through the strength of prayer. It's something that we actually need to work practically for. And this work needs to begin with ourselves.
And the
place that we need to begin is with other animals, from very meek and humble life forms such as fish and birds, etc.
Tendi yensona nga so chechok ramnim te yabo ze teni shine teni nga so chechok sama chikchila phanchen teni tsinjok yabo shya tendi ze yongsona nga so sim ga nang ne te tanglen yabo shi thsona teni nga so zambalang yenari nga so shisok yenari nga so chimchang yenari teni changma ramnim tendi ze yongres.
So if we're really able to cultivate a respect for all other life forms and are able to really internalize this at a personal level, then this will bring about changes at the level of the world, society, and family. Everyone will be able to be held in equality. So in terms of the law, everyone is held to be equal, and this is a very good thing. However, if we are actually not able to believe in and commit to equality at the level of our minds, then there will be a big conflict between the law and our own practice.
Matsola teni gomchur chigoreze gomchur stage gareze na matso mi mangchi shu de teni hal lepa ga thone soso ger ka chorwa di thola soso go chorwa dewa dang soso go chewa dungmor dang tela hal lepa ga teni thongchin teni jege yore rite yina mi jamba ga chorwa tela nga so dornang chembo jege mareze.
In terms of our everyday lives, we're accustomed to a particular kind of habit, and this habit is to care a great deal about our own feelings of happiness and our own feelings of suffering, but not to pay much attention to these in relation to others.
Tani nga so mi jang ga chorwa tela te nga so tenim thongchin sia dang tani tela torna je na tani di topchi tani nga so chama so ger la yang tani thabji yabo yonggon dus.
However, if we are able to pay a bit more attention and to pay a bit more care to the situation and feelings of others, then this will also result in benefits for ourselves.
Teni di jongder che goreze nga so jongder mapshi na teni nga so namgin nga so teni pakchang jawo te ngamani nga so soso ger te pe karchimbo she mi jamba te te karchimbo ma she ba te nga so komshi teni chak sarson teni yena nga so tan ramnim yabo she gona nga so jongder sem go toni jongder she gondus.
However, if we're going to change in this regard, it's important that we train ourselves. Our habit of cherishing ourselves and not caring about others is in actual fact a very deeply ingrained habit that we have developed. So in order to accustom ourselves to a new way of regarding beings, it's important that we train ourselves.
Nang chu ra wo na nang ba sa ji ba ra wo tin na tin khorang ga tin la da nje da de so ni ba la tin yi chi she ma re so so rang ga mi rang ga sem dang tin mi rang ga li bo tin ni ba da mi rang ga chabar de mi rang ga sem de la jong der she na ni ba pe chim bo yong ga re de la yi chi che re.
So in terms of Buddhism, it doesn't place much belief in the power and efficacy of gods and ghosts. Rather, it places its emphasis or belief in the power of the human mind and human effort.
Teni jongder she atela nga so thaba chimbo ucho na la jongder she sum yores.
And in terms of this training, there are three key training methods in the Mahayana teachings.
This chikdela dagin nyambazi gresitini ngarang la kanti yina jambayang te tang japore pena ngarang ga chechokte rentang me patin dizin samna te khorang so yang tin sam gayore khorang so teni ta kanti ngarang kanti samna te khorang so sam gayore chikpan japore nga chu ti thola khapri ji yo mare samni samlo tang ya tin ji jong dr shia chingdu tela dagin nyambazi gayore.
So the first of these is called equality of self and other, and this involves us reflecting on the fact that just as we regard our life to be priceless or beyond value, so too do other beings. They think exactly in this way, and so there's no difference between us two in any respect. So this is the first training method, equality of self and other.
Tani dagin nyambazeyate kangjiz la zegrezina tani pernang acho tani shema ge shetang o tani nyima mambo la tani chimeba tani ge sachazala ngacho mo rnga nyamden rona tani mo jamba jipote la khorang chola chimeze tani ngarang la tani chi terchi sherdam kang yoreze ngarang la ti yona ti kapsata ngacho dagin nyamba ge tani jongder tepshi mena Teni chi shertam kande ngarang kan thong sam gare ti korang chola mena ya tenge sanlo tang mare da ngarang ga thong gres.
So in relation to equality of self and other, we might imagine that 5 people find themselves stranded in the desert after a number of days, and that of these 5 people, only myself has a bottle of water to drink. If we hadn't trained ourselves in equality of self and other, then we would naturally think that the water, that I am thirsty and that I should drink the water. We wouldn't concern ourselves for the other 4 people.
Tani dagin nyambazeyate kang rezina tani tang nge samlo tana tang ngarang la tani chi sherdam kang yore ti mi jamba te chola menduzi ta ngarang ga tini thongjang na ta tondak mendu tini kangti kangstar nya ngarang chama gang thong nge khamba gang thong tini khorang ga gang thong nga chu chama ramnim shini thong samni tini sambi samlo tela dagin nyambaze gres.
So what would equality of self and other mean in this context? Well, it would involve us recognizing that here we are, I have water, the others don't, and yet we all share the same desire to drink water, so therefore I can take one mouthful and then share the rest of the water with the others.
Tani nistong ngapchi ga lola tani nga chon zambalang ga matang tani tongshir gubchila rojires gubchu koksum rekres
gubchu kosum
tongshir gubchu koksum
93
93
let's say. So it's said in the year 2050 that the world population will reach 9.3 billion.
Reso
yeah.
Tani tanga chon zambalang ga sakola ga thola yopi tani zishangda nga so mi za chokba te so changma ser domna e khorang ga mo gangja zi ge tini khaso thup gare mo tongshir jachi thamba khaso thup gare.
So if we were to bring together all of the food resources that are available to feed these people, then these resources would be able to feed 10 billion? 10 billion, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, tongshir jachi thamba.
Oh, 8 billion, sorry.
Yeah. Tani ti kapsa nga so karte dagjin nyamba ga semde mena tani nga chon zambalang ga mo chama ga tani thongkhong ga thola tani ta thapchu jejires.
And if at this time we haven't really adopted an approach of equality of self and other, then there will be very severe struggles over resources that break out among humanity.
Tani ti kapsa nga so tani tarta ga tani harjang hungonthong ga char ga laksar te so thamje bo tani nga chon rowa mi rla japshi ya yong ga mare ti kapsa tani nga chon rowa mi rg makasha ya lokres.
And at this point in time, all of these extremely advanced technologies that we have will not be used in service of humankind, but will be used for its destruction.
teni darshan nyamba ga teni semte teni ngaso ngama la tana lo tongchang ni da ngabja ga kongla ngaso darshan nyamba ga semze ya te nangba ga pe kar chimbo lan jo koreze jeti ti kapsu te yona yang halepa yakpore da mena te ti nang chimbo mareze teni tarta ina ngaranso ta lo nish lo sumchi ga jila teni darshan nyamba ga semze ya te pe kar chimbo re te mena ngaso chotab me ban koreze.
So if we think about the importance of equality in self and other, this was something that was extremely important 2,500 years ago in the time of the Buddha. But we could say that even though it was very important then, in terms of its significance at the time, it might not have been such a major thing if it hadn't have been as popular as what it was. However, now where we are at this point in time, and particularly in the next 20 or 30 years, if we don't apply this approach, then it is quite possible we will not be able to survive.
Teni chabar da ngarang so tarta nga so roa mi riki teni tenrola teni leka lelu o wangcha dang teni topshik yona tele jamba jimsung ka ke margowa wangcha dang topshik yona teni nga so mi jamba ga chechokla nga so rengkong japchokchong rabo teni ga samlo te teni ti kapse teni da yong rezi ti kapse yona teni ti kapse teni samlo ta nga so mi rik thola yong re ti kapse tenro thola mare mi thola yong rezi.
And at that point in time, the practice that we have cultivated now, where the rich the powerful and influential use their power and influence to impose life value onto other life forms, this practice in another 20 or 30 years, or when the Earth's resources become scarce, will start to be used among humans themselves.
Teni ta tinti mayung wazata she gona teni ngaso te boker she atang teni ju diktor ramandata teni changwa yongo ya mare mutsu sem gona ni jongder she gondus.
In order to avoid this coming about, in addition to launching various campaigns and making a loud noise, it's important that we train ourselves at the level of our own minds.
Teni jang acho teni darshan nyamba ga teni samlo te karte mena pena khemchang sigla samlo tang ba yena ti khemchang sig bode pena mo khorang ga teni khemchang sig nang na yong khen ga mo sig bode te khorang ga gang don do te je te me jamba te la dungur yong da ma yong da te cha ni samlo tang ga ma re ji khemchang sig na la shuchok sigla samlo tang ba yena nga shuchok na la yong khen ga mi wang sha jan me teni domjur chante so rang do pa kang na te le tali mi nyam chung da mi kyo bo de so la ti chorwa kan de yong ma yong dungur kan de yong ma yong ti sawa ni samlo tang ga mares te kang re jina khorang wang cha yo na te khorang le ka kang le na le chok chong da bo wang cha te ni le grin ro yo re nga so.
If others or if people don't understand the importance, or they don't view others as equal to themselves, then, and this idea that those with power can do whatever they like, if this idea becomes normalized, then we can imagine what the results would be at the level of an individual family. One person would do as they like, they wouldn't pay attention to anyone else, and it would cause all kinds of problems. If we think about this at the level of society, it would be just the same. The powerful would be doing what they wanted. They wouldn't care how it affected the meek and the poor. And it would essentially be a situation of the powerful and influential doing what they like, and this situation becoming normalized.
Teni ta oto ngacho darshan nyamba ga teni semkham gu jongder she ya tapshi tap depo zeng changma lang chu che.
So I'd like to introduce briefly actually how we engage in the practice of cultivating the equality of self and other.
Teni te nam pe shu tang chok go rezena pe na ngacho gunti khawan ba pi ne ko ta sachan den rawo ina teni yu ki mari pe na america ga sharshong rawo teni ga sacha jangmo yo sa ta teni ga kabla ngacho gungkha teni sholola ju teni kyo na re teni lili na re teni ga teni chamni ro de yong kan teni zaje mesa kunji mesa teni pe jangmo changni dungur nyong yo den ken teni ga semchen nga chun thung ine kamna teni ndo sam go res.
So how we do this is we think of a place that is very cold in the middle of winter when it's snowing, and we think of an animal such as a dog or a stray cat or some other kind of stray animal that is without shelter and suffering in this extremely cold weather, and we bring to mind an image of this kind of animal.
강바 메사다 더니 점낭라 대사 메사 딘디가 뭐 교보 딘디도 소실로라 되는 듯수 뭐 딘디가 저 묵은 통이 값을 딘 삼고그레스.
Or alternatively, it could be a person who is homeless without anywhere to live, and when we see them with our own eyes, we reflect on their situation.
더니 간디 삼고그레스나 페다 더니 다 남시장 몬든지즈레 더니 자마자에 말에 더니 때 pe chamore tini tinji ga nala tini dabo jam khin yo mare tinji ga tini che yanare tini lili yanare tini khorang nga yena kandi re insare samne sam gore ngarang karti tini chinde yena kandi insare samne sam gore.
So in this situation where the suffering being is without house, is without food, and is without anyone to care for them, whether it be a dog or a cat or a person, what we need to think is, what would it be like if this person were me? What would it be like if this being were me in the same situation?
Yana korang nge apa yena kandi insare ngaranga ama yena kandi insare samne di chöyna liliyena tani korang shorongla chamdenken ge moyena kartini apa terandani de korangla desame kyumme tani zayame tindishini tani di lamkhadela deona de lung tindi jabgundu khangbabgundu dinalayona nge kandi insare nge kandi samsari samne tani samgores.
Or alternatively, we can reflect on how we would feel if it were our own mother or our own father who is in this situation, without house, without food, without care, on the side of the road, in the middle of all the wind and snow. How would it be if this were our own mother or father?
Yana korang ni pu yinna kanti yinsare ngarang ko pomo te terang tini korang tini rosa mendu same ta zaya me tini dungur tini yonggo yona kanti yinsare nge chora kanti yinsare nyam samne tini samlo tanggo ore.
Or we can think, how would it be if it were my own daughter or my own son who was in this situation with no place to live and no food and undergoing this kind of suffering? What would I feel if this were the case?
So
in terms of our practice, our training practice, this is the first step or the first stage. So in contemplating or in reflecting like this, whether it be a dog or a cat or another human being, we will arise a feeling of empathy. And from once we arouse this feeling of empathy, we then move on to the second stage of this practice.
Javi tini jamnyum ke chazi ores tin jamnyum ke chade kana jena pela ngarang ka aba yenara ngarang yenare ngarang ko po yenare tini ngaso sama ngarang la tini dewa yongna samne tini samge ore ngarang la tini zaji me pata kyonji me pe tini dumur te mena samne tini samge ore khorang ge yante samge ore mi chho yante samge ore lili ge yante samge ore sha ge yante samge ore tini nya ge yante samga so sami te samge ore jamnyum res teni ngaso titolan jamnyum yenna teni ngarang tasangarang wangcha dezi yore te yona teni ngarang ga teni jamnyum yenna yang teni nge jamnyum tela tsinjok ma shini teni jamba tamchi bo teni dungmur yona nge tela samlo ma tang yana nge ti dungmur ngarang ga deski te yongwa ga che te jamba la dungmur ma botat teni jina nge tsawan in jik mundu samne te ngarang ga norwa re samne te norwa ti nguzun che go re.
So at this stage, we acknowledge that the being suffering is not our father, might not be our own son or daughter or mother, and it's not ourself either. However, the being undergoing suffering is nevertheless equal to us or any of our loved ones in fundamental ways. That is, primarily just like ourselves and just like our loved ones, this being who is currently suffering has no desire whatsoever to be without food, without house, or to be in this situation of suffering. So in terms of their desire for happiness and their lack of desire for suffering, they are exactly the same as us. They're exactly the same as our parents. And in fact, all beings are like this, regardless of whether they're fish or birds or other small forms of life form. So in reflecting like this, we generate a strong sense that for the sake of our own happiness, to harm other beings who are equal to us in their desire for happiness and their lack of desire for suffering, that this is in fact an extremely mistaken way of thinking and acting.
Tani nga tso njamnim yin sambaga samlo telab jongder samlo mambo tangna tani nga tso yin rangbo go mare tani nga tso tsama ta nga tso tsama njamnim re nga tso zambon de la yongken go tani mo tongshir donche tamba yin na ja te mayin bi tani chokchak mambo yore tsama nga tso tsama dewa tobi chet tsama baba jege yore dungmun mayong wa ge chet tani nga tso tsama baba jege yore te yona nga tso tsama njamnim re samba nga tso tsechok ko tonin njamnim yin samba samlo de tang zapo yong re.
So by working on this practice for a period of time, it is possible for us to develop a very deep and profound recognition or understanding of the equality of all beings. That is, aside from the 7 billion humans that exist on the planet, there are also myriad other life forms who, just like ourselves, strive very hard for happiness and strive very hard to avoid suffering.
Tani te tsarvi jini tini nga tso komba jongder ko komba samba de pogo res.
And after we have completed this stage of the contemplation, we move on to the third stage.
Tini komba samba de kang resina ota nga tso saman jamnim yinna oya tini ta nge ngarang chikbo te la samlo tang te jamba thamche pola samlo ma tang na tan recommend te na tani nga tso chishir tam kang de ta nge thong kharang cholan thong nga tso mo nga bo ti tan jamnim shinin thong sambi samlo te tani ngone ngarang sim ga tang ni ti yung reze ota nga tso chishir tam kang ma to yo mare te nga tso jamnim shinin thong tani te zat sarvi jini ta nga tso kang de yen te nga tso thapsi jamba yo na me ta go re ma to ba ngarang chikbo thong kharang cho shina shi te kang ri song na song samya ga samlo de non-chir yenpa shini, di koran sem ka tangni, ta nga tsun ramnyam shini tonggo, nga tsun chintu tsama ramnyam shi, sambi samlo de, di tangni yungres.
And at this third stage of the practice, we generate from the depths of our heart a very strong awareness of the equality of ourselves and others. So in terms of the example where 5 of us are in the desert with only 1 bottle of water, from the depths of our heart we generate an understanding that it is mistaken to only think of ourselves and not for others, not caring whether they live or die. We realize that it's necessary to share the water. Willingly we do this. After we finish the water, then together we'll come up with another method for addressing our next round of concerns. So at the third stage, our sense of equality between self and other becomes deep and profound.
Teni nga so tsangma tinti ga mi jan la samlo tang ya nga so par tinti mi jan la samlo tang na teni mi jan ba so nga so ser tinti yang samlo tang gres.
When we get into the habit of thinking about others in this way, then they will also begin to regard us in the same way too.
Tini tinti yin song na nga tsun nyama shikla nga tsun zambalang la tini tongkong ko mandang wanda oda yang na tini chik jia chimbo tini kyab jia chimbo rangshong ko tini rangshong kam ko jikpa tini shong song na yang 옛나양 아주 미티니 셈거더니 니식티 찍찍라 땐 살티더니 랑숑 감고 노바당 직바티솔 야르탑 그래서
And if we're able to really make this strong, then even if in the future there becomes a situation where our resources are insufficient or there is an extremely large-scale natural disaster, that we will be able to transcend it.
Tenita teranga tsogo chatati nala jigdomna kangrezena jigdomjana nge tsakashi nala sren jigdomna tsetroko rentangzena rentang gyaptav ko mareze koranga rentang ngaso tanga gyaveyo mareze kite nge teranga chatati jigdomins.
So if I had to boil down the essence of my talk tonight, it would be that it is not possible to give a value to a human life. It's not possible to give it a numeric value.
Teni ngaso teni tsetrok jamba ge tsetrokla ngaso teni rengkong gyapdeya te gormo chigre zeni rengkong gyapdeya te ngaso norare te ngaso nonchar chishu tere zeate ngim jigdom chigre.
And the other basic point of tonight's talk would also be that our practice of valuing others, other forms of life, or imposing valuations of their life is a grave mistake, in fact, our gravest mistake.
Teni ngarang la samlo tang pa yenda di ton te la samlo tang ne teni ngerwa condition songse na teni nitong chigu gubchu gogya kalo yanchula ngarang karzi rangluk pa teni zmenz. Karzi rangluk pa zmenz ngarang.
Si.
Ngarang nga.
Nam.
Nitong chigu gubchu gogya yanchula.
Konda kemungan tarung ko maso.
Chigu gubchu gogya yanchula ijo 1998年之前
Before 1998, I wasn't a vegetarian.
야, 근데 니통 지그급지 고고 로라 때니 나랑 까르제랑 봐 차그래지.
직동 급자 급지고고 그래 봐.
그래 급지고고.
I became a vegetarian in 1999. And I have been vegetarian up until today. Nikdong, lo nikdong kanang laari.
2000年.
Re, deni dawa katse.
Dawa jiba ge cefa ni shi dun.
Oh yeah. Sorry, I'm not very good with numbers and dates. So in the year 2000, on the 27th of October, I went to an abattoir in eastern Tibet.
Shekanga nangla soni parjamna tani lakbandarni parsawani japsab ko benduse.
Chize.
Parjabsa sonja tao tuzai chang去拍照zi ngarang. Ya, ti tuzai chang nangla soni parjabi kapsni ngarang lakbandarni parjabsab ko benduse.
Okay, and when I went to the abattoir and I was holding my camera to take photos, I was unable to do so because I was so scared, my hands were shaking so much. However, I forced myself to take many photos, and I did document many photos on that day. And after this day, I visited 3 other abattoirs and also took many photos on these occasions. And based on what I saw visiting all these abattoirs, I wrote down what I saw and in the form of several articles. And I made made DVDs which contained visual footage of my visit to the abattoirs and disseminated them widely to advocate a vegetarian movement.
Teni ti lorgi ti nala ngarang tamgin mambo jong mambo she yo yina tarang aso khompayo maris.
And in relation to this particular history, there are many stories I could tell you, but I haven't got enough time today.
Teni ne jewa kangre yenzina ngaso sama dagjin nyamba chego orezina te chantumbore ngaso chegona khaborezi yinayang ngaso jiniji jinlyangse teni mi jamba ga ta simjin jamba ga chorwala teni dornang shero nangse.
So my hope is that even though really implementing or actualizing the equality of self and other is a very high goal or a very high demand, I would hope that everyone can pay attention and take seriously the life of others.
Teni nyamachila ngaso semgonala tenti yapore sona teni ngaso chumzeya ta dictorzeya tenti menayang ngaso rangshikun ramnyam shitab kores.
And if one day we are able to cultivate our minds to a sufficiently high level in this regard, then it won't make a difference whether we have the law or not. Equality will be able to be manifested naturally.
And
then peace and happiness will naturally come of effect in the world.
And whether
or not this comes about really rests on the shoulders of students in universities just like this.
Yenang shirik teso gandhi pesho tang goda laksar teso gandhi pesho tang goya ti semkum gotone samlote yakbozu goda tra matavna pe nyenka jembores.
So at universities like this, we learn about and develop all kinds of advanced technology. We learn and develop all kinds of advanced knowledge. However, if in fact the people who control the use of this knowledge and the use of their technology, their minds are not healthy, then there are extreme risks.
Teni laksarta shirik santom bolo patang nyamde teni ngaso dagjin nyambandao teni ga samlo utone ngaso shirik tang laksarta ganga thola pepsho tang chok ganga thola pepsho tang machok o teni ga loso tongya te pe karchim bore ngaso samgan de teni shipa ngaso rewa haliba chimbo janga yores.
So in addition to researching and developing new advanced technology and other advanced forms of knowledge, it is my hope that students at universities such as this also engage in discussion and reflection on what are the appropriate ways to use or implement or deploy this technology and knowledge, and what are the inappropriate areas that this technology and knowledge is deployed in. It is my hope that in addition to simply learning about technology and knowledge, that we also have this kind of ethical discussion too. So that's the end of my talk tonight. Thank you very much to everyone.